What's going on YouTube? Chrono here, and welcome back to another PSO2 video. So today we're going to be going over the new weapons and they'll be coming out with the new urgent quest, the Dark Falls Invasion. But before we jump into that, guys, if you're new to the channel, I'm Chrono. I cover content primarily covering PSO2. Much appreciated subscribers work our way towards that 7K. Anyway, let's go ahead and jump into this. So a lot of people saw the new weapons pop up over on the headline, and I'm sure you have friends or even you yourselves probably had reactions to, man, I'm glad I didn't farm my relic weapon. Now I have a weapon to go after, so on and so forth. However, that's not necessarily true across the board. I really wanted to look into this and dive into it deeper, so I took some time to take a look and see all the information available to us, pretty much go through everything frame by frame. And from what I can tell, there might be some situations where these weapons are going to be better, but in some cases, they're going to be either equal or a marginally percentage worse than the relic weapons available to us. So the first question you probably have is, well, relic weapons are super expensive, they're super difficult to get hold of. Why would I not just sell this weapon and go after the other weapons? They mentioned they're going to be easier to get a hold of. Well, yes. However, they also did mention that they're going to upgrade. Now, they didn't really specify exactly how much harder. However, looking through the content that we had available to us, we can see how much more difficult these weapons are going to upgrade. And that's what we're going to be talking about today in today's video. So to get a better understanding of what we're going to be looking at, let's take a look at the weapons themselves. Let me pull up, I think I have, yep, here it is. So shout out to Crickcaster Q over on Ship 3. Their Twitter had a really good screenshot of what we have here on the weapon. Now, I'm going to go over a couple of things we can see here. First off, it's a little blurry because, of course, it's a screenshot from the broadcast itself. But we can see the weapons upgrade at the moment is at plus 40. We know it's a 5-star. It is a sword. We can see the potential. It's level 1 version. And we can see how much it's going to cost. Now, looking at this, there's a couple of things that stick out. First off, its equip conditions are level 36, so you will have to level up at least once before you can equip the new weapon. That much is obvious. Its attack power is a staggering 333, which is huge. Right now, if you compare that to the swords we have available, so let's take a look at the relic. The relic sword at max attack or at max upgrades is only 324. That's pretty substantial when it comes to differences. However, if we look at the potential, we see it's a virtuoso unit. Now, I don't believe we have that potential in the game yet anywhere else. Let me double check. We have Valorous unit. Yeah, okay, so we don't have that vigorous unit. Cool, just wanted to make sure. But what the potential actually does is potency plus 18%, increase rest assign HP recovery, and reduce PP consumption by 1% of the number of different augments, of different weapon and unit augments that you have, up to 15%. Now, this doesn't specify that they have to be every single different type of augment. If it's just the number of augments in general, I mean, the wording does say number of different augments between weapons and units. That's a bit interesting. But there are two major things to keep in mind here. The potency 18% is the first half of the potential, and the second half has all these extra clauses along with it. Now, in the case of potentials like this, every single time we look at these potentials, if there are different clauses, like there's a first half and a second half, the first half is what scales. The second half remains exactly the same. So if we're looking over at this weapon, realistically speaking, the only thing we should see increase from this 18%, or from this actual potential, is this 18% here. This likely will stay exactly the same, meaning the maximum you will get is 15% increased rest assign recovery. That's assuming you are at max use of the potential, and 1% or 15% reduction in cost of our PP cost reduction, essentially. So from what we can see here, we know that these weapons do have a massive, buff in attack, about 9 attack damage itself in general. But their potential actually is not a chunk weaker, but it's a good chunk less potency overall. If we take a look at something like the relic sword, we can see that its potential is 27% potency. Now, why did I choose the relic sword specifically? Probably because they showed us a sword, but we can take a look at something like, let's say, the jet boots. The jet boots also have 27% potency, and if you take a look, they have 10% PP cost reduction and 20% PP recovery when attacking. So not only are you using, you do have that PP cost reduction, but you also have extra PP recovery when you do attack. Now, that is less, of course, than the 15% maximum that you can get from the Virtuoso, but it is worth mentioning that we're looking at 18% potency. Over the course of 4 levels, you're not going to get higher than probably 23% in my opinion. If we look at the potentials we have access to, I mean, take a look at it. Starting at 16, we're going to 21. Starting at 17, 22. We can see starting at 18, 24. Like realistically, I would say at max, we'll probably see that potential hit 24 in most cases. Like for a potential to go all the way to 27 in most cases, it starts out pretty high around 21. Now, that isn't to say that they couldn't have this jump crazy high. It is worth mentioning that if this potential goes up to anywhere near 27%, these weapons are going to crush the relic weapons. Now, do I think they're going to do that? No. Realistically, I think this potency is going to go probably to 23, maybe 24% overall. Even in that situation, it's going to be very close to relics because of the extra amount of base damage that these have, which cannot be understated. Base damage is actually pretty big when we have so little of it going into these percentages. So that's kind of what's keeping these things on par with one another. But the other thing to keep in mind as well is at the first unlock of the potential is 150 photon scales. Now, at the moment, we can only gather 5 photon scales a day. However, a lot of the new content we're going to be doing, apparently the Dark Falls content, will be dropping photon scales as well. We don't know how many, we don't know how often, but from anyone who played PSO2 Oracle or base PSO2, you know that when we're dealing with drops off of bosses, in most cases, they're randomized. Well, not randomized, but the amount that you get tends to be randomized from them. So it can be anywhere as low as like 1 to 5. In some cases, it was like from 10 to 40, things of that set. And that's if you can get this potential all the way maxed up, and that's one weapon. It's 150 photon scales for the first weapon. Let's assume this stays 150 across the board. It's a lot of photon scales. That's 600 photon scales to unlock its potential. That's not to mention if we're going to need something like NX Cube. Now, they might forego the NX Cubes for the final upgrade, but if this is going to be on par with your relic weapon, it's going to need all levels of its actual potential. Now, it's also worth mentioning that unless you're using a relic that's got a good potential, so like say for example, you are using, sword main as a relic. Realistically speaking, the secondaries on the new weapon, on the Cinquem, are better. And if these weapons are close in damage, you're going to want this weapon over the other. But if you're someone who's using a tech relic or possibly even a ranged relic, you might not really even care about these new weapons. It's mostly going to be the melee relics, because the melee relic potentials are pretty bad in my opinion. While this one has a ton of potency, you've got damage resistance, nice, and the rest on recovery. Comparatively, you can't really match up with the utility of just extra damage in general. Let's say for example, the daggers themselves. The daggers, I mean, you've got 21% potency, but then of course you just have like explosions that happen, which I believe are like 200 potency every 10 seconds around you. So, I mean, while they're not terrible, it's still going to be outclassed by the new weapons. So in situations like this, yeah, I can foresee you wanting to go after the new weapon, but it's not as simple as the new weapon's easier to get will be easier to upgrade. We don't know how many of these actual photon scales we're going to get, and realistically speaking, we don't know how long it's going to take to get these weapons to upgrade. However, it does also offer an option to have a weapon that you upgrade over time. It is also mentioning if these weapons are easier to get, you're probably going to see fixes on these weapons a lot more. And if you add on a fixa to the weapon itself, especially in the cases of these weapons being very close, then in most situations this is going to surpass your relic weapon. However, with higher levels, drop rates of relics might increase. They've already mentioned that the relic itself is not going to get severely outclassed for quite some time. My best guess is probably not until after the June update. We're not going to see something really outclass the relic weapons. But I did want to talk about this and mention these because I've already seen the naysayers, or I've already seen the conspiracy theorists jump out like, oh, sell your relics, they're not going to be worth it, so on and so forth, when that's just not the case. Some people have really heavy investments into their relics, especially with the the capsules that we had available to us. Those capsules are very strong, and in some situations they're extremely expensive to get a hold of now while the scratch is completely gone. I think last I checked, the Addy Death Mill capsule on ship 1 was upwards of 15 mil, which is absolutely insane. And my opinion, is nowhere near worth even, like, realistically speaking, relics are almost like are around 20 mil roughly. In some cases upwards of 30, and they're just going down in price, and they're only going to keep going down in price because these weapons exist, because people are going to have this mindset of, I can go after this weapon and not get a relic, and then I'll just sell my relic. Or even worse, people who aren't playing the game right now, while things are kind of dying down a little bit before it jumps back up, are selling their gear at the worst time to sell it. This is actually when it's going to be the cheapest. In those situations, people don't want their gear, they're waiting for the next piece of content. This is probably not the time that you want to do that. If anything, maybe you want to look into buying, that way you have access to something. But my voice is going apparently, so maybe we should go ahead and end the video here. If you guys have any questions, feel free to toss in the comments below. Again, this is just going based on the information we have in front of us. Things can change. Maybe they decide that, relic weapons are going to drop crazily easier. In that situation, maybe relic's super awesome to go after. Maybe we find out that this potential scales insanely better than anything else, right? Like maybe we go and find out this potential goes from 18% all the way to 27%, and then all of a sudden these weapons are phenomenal and they're going to absolutely trash what we have currently. Chasing the new thing is something that people tend to do in gear, or when it comes to gearing in video games, all the time. So it's totally understandable, and that definitely can happen. But as it stands right now, in my opinion, this is the best case scenario we could have had with these relic weapons. Essentially, this is another situation where it's Evil Coat compared to Straga, where it's not as drastic. Evil Coat compared to Straga was not nearly as drastic, but realistically speaking, it's one of those situations where it kind of can be better in certain situations versus it can be worse. So let me know what you guys think. I'll go ahead and end the video here because I'm rambling enough as it is. And I'll see you guys next time. Take care. Peace out.